Hey everybody, this is Bill DeVoe. I am the founder and principal consultant for Artemis Agile Consulting. Today we're going to be talking about Scrum in a nutshell, i.e. the ceremonies and roles, just to give a brief overview of what Scrum is and how it operates. So first things we talk about Agile, and that Agile is sort of an umbrella term that encompasses a lot of different practices and methodologies and frameworks. And Scrum is one of these practices. It's a framework that people use for primarily development, software development, but it's also very applicable in other areas. And we can talk about how this can help your organization. So we talk about Scrum teams. They're made up of three different roles. There is the product owner, there's the Scrum Master, and then there's a delivery team. And the delivery team, I explicitly use that term rather than developers because it actually is a cross-functional team that has all of the roles, the talents, and skills necessary to do all of the work necessary for the product. So that could be developers. It may also include testers or some QA folks. It may also include some dev ops folks or just some regular operations people. It might include some other analysts, that kind of thing. The idea here is that the team has all of the skills and talents necessary to meet the goals of the product owner for the product that they're creating. So the Scrum Master is primarily the role that you may have heard of when you heard about Scrum. And they are responsible for the process. So what their job encompasses is facilitating, scheduling those ceremonies. They're constantly checking on the team health, seeing where we can make improvements, where are we behind, where are we ahead, those kinds of things. I like to think of it as sort of like they're the herd dog for the team. If you think about the team as sort of the flock that has a job, which is to eat the grass in this particular area, then the Scrum Master is the herd dog. They keep the business wolves away, and they keep the team focused on the work. They don't let the team wander off into other areas of the pasture. They keep them focused and working on the things that we need to get done for this particular sprint. They remove impediments. So if there's problems that can get in the way with the team for whatever reason, they can't complete work. The Scrum Master is the one primarily responsible for finding out how to resolve those and then getting those impediments taken care of. Any blockers or obstacles would be encompassed there. They're also coaching the team. A lot of things that people will say is that the Scrum Master they think of it as sort of almost like this administrivia role of making sure we have all the ceremonies and making sure that everything happens and that we have a retrospective. And yes, those things are important. And the Scrum Master is responsible for those things. But the Scrum Master is also the primary coach for the team. And that oftentimes ends up not being visible and often forgotten. And it's really important because the Scrum Master does more than just the administrivia. They do coach the team. They find those areas where the team can make improvements, and then they try to work with help the team find the best way to help resolve those deficiencies. And then they also represent the team to management. So if there's a problem that's coming up in the team, they're the ones that can go to the management team and try to find ways to resolve whatever problems or issues are coming up at the team level. The second role we talk about is a product owner. And the product owner is the person who is solely responsible for the backlog, which is the work that we need to do to build this product. So the backlog consists of backlog items, product backlog items, PBIs. Traditionally, we have been using user stories to represent the work that's in the backlog. That's not something that Scrum requires. You can use anything else. But stories are a very easy and well-known way of representing that work, and so that's traditionally what people have been using. The product owner is also responsible for prioritizing or ranking the backlog. You often hear sometimes, well, these are all musts. Okay, that's great, but sometimes some musts are more important than other musts, and so it's the product owner's job to rank them relative to one another and actually come up with a list of 1 through N of the work that needs to be done and the order in which it needs to be done. And they're also focused on delivering the maximum ROI. Their job is to find the way to meet the needs that the customer has today in the best way possible, and then focus on the needs the customer has tomorrow in the best way possible. So they're trying to maximize that return on investment with the team. But they don't just simply plan this work and then expect the team to go off and do it. They work with the team to plan it, understand what needs to be done. They answer questions about the work. And then anytime that the team completes work, a user story or a backlog item, PBI, then it's the product owner's responsibility to accept that work. Say, yes, this meets the requirements that I set out in the story or the PBI, and I accept the work that you've delivered. They usually own the roadmap, which we'll get into in a minute, but they're responsible for sort of like, what's the how what are we where are we going and how are we going to get there, which could also say is the vision. For instance, if your vision is to go on a road trip, going the wrong direction for 2 hours may not be the best idea. So sometimes you need to have that vision. The product owner sometimes owns that vision. Sometimes it comes from higher up in the organization, but they have that vision. They understand where we're trying to go. Oh, we're going to San Francisco. Okay, great. Well, then going from New York to Boston is not really going to get us to San Francisco. So they're responsible for figuring out how we're going to get there. And then they kind of figure out a little bit of the roadmap along the way. Well, we need to hit, Chicago, and we got to hit Denver, and we got to hit San Francisco. Just some high level milestones along the way. That's sort of your roadmap. We don't want to focus too much on the long term, how what's going to happen. We may decide to take a left turn and go to the Grand Canyon, or go up to go see the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. That's fine, but the product owner would be the one responsible for saying, here's the change we're going to make and why we're going to make it. The last role that we have on a Scrum team is delivery team. They do have responsibilities. It isn't just simply a turn the crank kind of thing. They do have responsibilities for delivering that high quality product. We're not trying to just simply get out a product quickly. We need to try to get out a high quality product, one that is robust, one that is as error free as we can make it. They are the ones who are going to commit to the work that we're going to complete during a sprint. So they're the ones that have to say, yes, I'm agreeing that we can complete this work during this sprint or iteration. They consist of 7 plus or minus 2 people, so 5 to 9. But they have to be full-time committed team members. If we're doing things with a team that is only partially committed to this work, then in 9 times out of 10, other projects that they're working on are going to be screaming louder or a higher priority. So what we want to try to do is we want to try to get a committed team, 100% devoted to this project, so that we can ensure that they will be able to deliver the commitments that they're making. They are self-organizing and not self-managing, which means that they're the ones that determine how they're going to operate. We're less concerned about things like where you're going to sit, that kind of stuff. This is more along the lines of how they're going to function as a team, and they are responsible for running that. We don't want to dictate that. That's for the team to decide. Another thing we like to have is fixed membership. We don't want people coming in and out of the team during the sprint. Again, because of that commitment that we've made at the beginning of our planning process, we want to be able to ensure that we're going to have some consistency. Given that sprints are relatively short in time, we usually can do this, but it's one of those things we do want to try to focus on. And then, again, as I mentioned before, as cross-functional as possible. So you want them to have the skill set that they need to complete the work. And that could be things like I need to have UI and DB folks and maybe some middle tier people. It could be I need to have testers and basic development teams. So we want to make sure that the team is able to complete the work, and the way it's been structured, which is by vertical slices, which I'll talk about in another video here in the near future. So to kind of give you a visual representation of what a Scrum team is, you've got your delivery team, and they are in that middle circle. They are isolated from everything else. The Scrum Master is that herd dog running around the outside of it, keeping that delivery team focused and together. The product owner is the one who is going to interface with the outside, and you've got your stakeholders and your business people, sometimes your customers out there. All of their requests have to go through the product owner. The goal here is that they're not going to go directly from, say, a business person, say a VP who's got a list of things they want to get done. That VP shouldn't be going to the delivery team directly. They should be going through the product owner, and the product owner and the Scrum Master are there to help enforce that. but it's very incumbent upon the delivery team to also say no when that kind of thing happens. It's important that the product owner be the one who's determining the work that's going to go to the team and how it's going to get there. And how do they do that? Via the product backlog. So you can see here, I've got a little product backlog. It's got 3 blue boxes and 1 red box. That red box actually represents technical stories. So sometimes the work that we have, that we want a team to do, isn't necessarily just all business features. Sometimes there is some technical elements you want them to have incorporated. And so we want to make sure that we treat those technical stories, that technical work, as first-class citizens. They are the same kind of work that we would be getting from a product feature, but it's up to the product owner to prioritize that work. If the team is the one who's initiating that request, they have to be able to provide to the product owner the justification for it and why we want to do that. And the product owner is still the one who's ultimately responsible for the priority of that work against other work. So other roles that we typically have in an organization are project management or program management. And people go, well, I'm a project manager. Where does my job go? And honestly, in a lot of the ways we look at it, the traditional responsibilities for a project manager or a program manager end up getting divided among other roles. So part of the tracking and understanding where the team is, that kind of goes to the Scrum Master. The work and direction of the work and when we're going to do things goes to the product owner. So there's elements of that role that go to other places. Project managers tend to slide into one of those 2 roles normally. So sometimes they'll end up being a Scrum Master or a product owner, depending on their familiarity with the product or their familiarity with the team. You may want to slide into one of those other 2 roles. The other thing that changes here is management. In a lot of places, management typically has gotten where they are because they're the smartest person in the room. And so they tend to be more directive about how they assign work out to their teams. And so we want to change that because the teams are self-organizing. They are the ones who are going to determine how the work is going to get done. So management has to change and go from that directive style into more supportive style. They help support the Scrum Masters in removing impediments. They help enable their teams. It can be a real challenge sometimes when people are used to command and control kinds of style that they have to go to this way. And some people are well attuned to it and able to make that shift, and some people aren't. As an example, when I worked at Hewlett-Packard, one of the first things that they did is they said, you could be a very good technician, but when you get promoted to management, we know that you're not going to be a very good manager right off the bat, so we're going to help you understand what your new role is and how to do that. And the HP way that Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett helped instill in the company was very Agile-like in terms of management was supportive, not directive. So again, they don't define who does what. Those teams are self-organizing, and they also don't define the how. Again, the teams figure that stuff out. So we talk about the team, and then now we're going to talk about sort of, how do we get to the ceremonies part of it and with the ceremonies support from a planning perspective. So every day we have what's called the stand-up, and it's a 15-minute ceremony that we have where the entire Scrum team, which means the delivery team, the Scrum Master, and the product owner all participate, and they review the work that's been going on. So they answer 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I committing to do today? And am I blocked by anything? And then it's up to the Scrum Master and product owner to help understand if there's any blockers and also the work that's being done. And then maybe ask some very short follow-up questions. We keep daily stand-up to 15 minutes, no longer. It can certainly go shorter if your teams go faster. As teams get better, it will definitely start to go faster, and teams get better at these things pretty quickly. But the goal here is not to give a status update. We're not just simply saying, this project, this work is in progress. That's not very helpful. We want to say, here's what I delivered yesterday. Here's what I'm committing to deliver today. So it's almost like a planning meeting. That's what part of the planning onion. So we want to focus on the stand-up as a planning meeting. What are we planning to do today? Then we have our sprint planning meeting, which is a higher level meeting where we plan out the work that we're going to be doing over a longer time box. And so that time box is typically 2 to 4 weeks, usually 2 weeks, but some go 4. And we plan the work that we think that we can get done within that 2-week period, or that 2 to 4 week period. We have our release plan, which is again a higher level concept of how we're going to deliver work. It's multiple sprints in length, and again, it's higher level. These are all estimates, really, at the release plan and above. We're estimating the work that we can get done because we understand life happens. We're not going to be able to do everything we want to do, and we're going to end up having things bump us, and we're going to run into problems along the way. So the release plan really is an estimate. We expect we can get this stuff done with maybe 50% confidence, and this stuff, well, okay, we're maybe that's a little bit less. And maybe some things are 95% confidence or 90% confidence. So we want to try to make sure that the release plan is representative of the fact that these are estimates about how we're going to do work, not necessarily commitments. Then we have our roadmap. We talked about our roadmap before. This could be things like, again, like I said, we're going to Chicago, we're going to go to Denver. Oh, wait, we're going to stop off in Minnesota, go see the Ball of Twine. The roadmap can change, and it needs to be communicated if those changes are occurring. But again, it's a higher level milestone kind of approach to it. And then we have our vision, and our vision is really what we're going to be using to figure out where we're going. We're going to San Francisco. Okay, great. That's what we're going to do. How we get there, the kind of car we're driving, the kind of gas we're going to put into it, that kind of stuff. That's the team. The stops along the way, that's the product owner. So our Scrum process starts off with our product vision. We create a product backlog with product backlog items inside of that. That represents the work that we want to have done by the delivery team. Then we take a small chunk of that and create what's called a sprint backlog. And this is the work that we are committing to doing during our sprint. And our sprint work lasts 2 to 4 weeks. So as we go along, we will see that we have 2 to 4 weeks worth of time of work that we're going to try to fill in. We have our daily work, which is 24 hours, and every day we come back and we cycle back and we plan the next day. At the end of all this, at the end of a sprint, our goal is to have what we call the product increment or potentially shippable increment. The idea here is that when we have completed the work that we've got, it could, if we wanted to, be released to a customer. Not that it will be, but the possibility exists. So all the testing has been done for it. Everything is available for the customer to do if there's any documentation that's required, if there's any updates to online help, that kind of thing. All of that stuff has been done so that we can do that. There may be some release activities that occur independently of the product increment delivery, but the idea is really at the end of every sprint, we have something that we could potentially deliver, maybe with a little bit of work. So there are 4 ceremonies that help support this. Sprint planning, daily stand-up, sprint retrospective, and then the sprint demo or review. Now, there's one more that is used very frequently, but it's not required, which is backlog refinement. It used to be called backlog grooming. We've moved away from the term grooming and moved into refinement, which actually is probably a little more accurate of what the activity really is. We're taking our backlog, we're taking those PBIs, we're refining them down into work that we can actually do. So when we talk about backlog refinement, that's an opportunity for the team and the product owner to get together and review the work that's in the backlog, maybe ask questions, do that kind of stuff. And we'll get into that in a minute. So sprint planning obviously is one of the main things that we have to do. It is how we are going to identify the work that we're going to do over the next sprint and then committing to it. So the product owner has to come to that meeting with a prioritized or ranked backlog of work. Here's what I want you to work on next. The team then reviews that work, clarifies needs, then they estimate the work if it hasn't already been done. Usually that's been done. And then they commit. They say, yes, we agree to this. We can do all this work. The Scrum Master is going to provide checks and balances on the team and the product owner. Make sure the product owner isn't trying to push too much work onto the team. Make sure the team isn't taking on too much work or undercommitting. So the Scrum Master is going to help provide some of that check and balance to make sure that everything is good there. You may also do tasking, which is where you break out that work into smaller subtasks that the team then assigns or volunteers for. I prefer the team volunteer it, but I know that sometimes teams are they're more comfortable with assigning it based upon skill set and stuff. But sometimes that'll happen during sprint planning. I like it too. I think that having the team work together and tasking these things out makes a lot of difference in the quality of the tasking. But I know teams that don't do it and they do a fine job. So figure out your team and where you think they are and then find out the best way to move forward. Our daily stand-up, we talked about this as well, takes place every day during the sprint, um, every working day. The entire Scrum team participates. So it's not a status meeting. Again, it's a commitment meeting. We time box it to 15 minutes only. If you hit 15 minutes, you're done. You need to be focusing your team on making sure that they are trying to complete all of the necessary commitments during that 15-minute time box. So you're absolutely welcome to have what's called an after scrum or a 16th minute where you begin to talk about all those other things or ask questions and deep dive into some of the things that came up during stand up. But stand up is not a time for that kind of discussion. It really is here's what I'm committing to do, and then if you have questions about it, great, let's talk about it after scrum. The one thing here that's really important is the team committing to other team members. They don't commit to the Scrum Master or the product owner. A lot of times, teams that are used to working with a project manager give their updates to that project manager. That's who they're talking to. And when we shift over to Agile, sometimes that project management role, the team begins to feel like that's either the Scrum Master or the product owner. So they talk to that person. And we want to make sure that they're aware. We're not committing to them. You're committing to your teammates. We are all in this together. We're a team. We succeed or we fail as a team. So when you're committing, it's to everyone else. The other thing to remember is that anybody other than the Scrum team, they don't participate during the meeting. They have no say in what happens during stand-up. Their responsibility is to observe. They can ask questions afterward, but they're not responsible for assigning out tasks or they can ask maybe some simple questions and stuff. But the goal here is that they are primarily observers. And the last thing is everybody stands up, hence the title. The idea here is that with a stand-up, you're going to encourage people to get through it faster. If everyone's sitting down, then those meetings generally take longer, and so we don't want to have that be happening. We want to have everybody get through this very quickly so they can get back to work. And so we want to have a stand-up gets us through the process faster and makes it more productive. So at the end of every sprint, we have what's called the sprint retrospective. So this is an opportunity for us, for the Scrum team, to inspect and adapt, which is one of the primary principles of Agile. And so this helps identify areas where we want to improve. It also identifies very specific concrete actions that we want to take over the next sprint to address some of those things that we want to improve upon. And so some of those things may be we need more of X. And so maybe we have Bob take on trying to find out how we get more X. We don't want to turn it into a blame storming session. A lot of times it'd be like, well, Bob broke the build. And so, okay, well, let's take a step back. It wasn't so much that Bob broke the build, but the build broke. What can we do to try to prevent that from happening in the future? Well, maybe we can run some automated tests and find out if the build is, when you do a check-in, if the build works properly. Awesome. Okay, great. That sounds like a concrete action we can take. Who wants to own that? That's the kind of thing we want to do. We want to focus on our success, the team success, not individuals and whether they've succeeded or failed during the sprint. We'll also, at the end of the sprint, have what's called a demo or a review. This is where we're going to actually demonstrate working software. So there's no slideware here. We don't go in and simply show a list of slides and say, well, we worked on these 3 user stories and we completed this work. We want to actually be able to demonstrate the software that we created to the customers. And whether that's the product owner or the stakeholders or whether it's actually customers we bring in, doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're actually demonstrating working software. A lot of times people will want to have the product owner be the person demonstrating it because they're not on the team. They're not going to sort of know the way around some of the mushier parts of the code or the more fragile pieces. They're just going to jump in and start doing things, and sometimes they can find things as a result of that. It also sort of helps the team focus on we have to deliver solid, robust code. The entire Scrum team and the customers are present, ideally, and then we get direct feedback from those customers on what we produced. It's like, well, I love what you did, but I really don't like that it's blue. Okay, great. Well, let's fix that. Well, what color do you want it? Well, I want it to be green. Okay, Mr. Product Owner, can you make sure that we put a story in for the next sprint that says change it to green? That kind of thing. So it gives us an opportunity to get that feedback, and we understand sort of what the customer is looking for and whether we're meeting their needs. And again, the last one we talked about was Backlog Refinement. And this is an opportunity for the team and the product owner to really get together, spend some time reviewing the work that's coming up so the team isn't going to be surprised with it during sprint planning. It also gives them a chance to kind of think about it, sleep on it. They can come back with more questions, or they can come back with other ideas about how maybe the best way to do this. It can also allow those questions to go back to the product owner, who can then go back to the customer or the stakeholders and get some clarification if there's some ambiguity in the work items that we've identified. So that's Scrum in a nutshell, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this little presentation. We do offer some training courses in Scrum and SAFe, which is the Scaled Agile framework based on Scrum, from Artemis. We also do coaching for teams and organizations. There's my contact info. There'll also be in the links below. So please feel free and hit us up if you have any questions. Thank you very much, and have an awesome day.